Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, September 28, 2024. Time in Texas, about 11 a.m. Some of the sources I'll use today: BREITBART, Hal Turner, InfoWars, Deep Dive, Plus. Some of the things we'll cover: President Trump, war, outside and inside the U.S., the U.S. military, generals meeting, and Israel retaliation. So let's get started. We're going to begin with the tropics. So we know we've got several systems out here. Umberto is predicted to turn east away from the U.S. We do have Imelda now along the east coast, but also predicted to turn back to the east. It is predicted to bring heavy rain to Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, all the way up the coast today. And currently it's at 50 miles per hour, pressure 993, moving north at 9 miles per hour. Space weather. We've had a few M-class flares in the last 24 hours. Under the current pole shift, which we are undergoing, we're having global droughts and floods. So that's going on. And now we have this. This is from Quayle's aggregate site, an article by Peter St. Onge. This has to do with the war President Trump appears to be bringing inside the U.S. We know that Tuesday we'll have the generals meeting at the Pentagon. We'll also have a possibility for a U.S. government shutdown. So we have this information coming out. President Trump could use a government shutdown to do a purge of the U.S. government and use the Impoundment Control Act to do so, and to take down money that's being used for wasteful projects. So and also get rid of, purge 50,000 government, deep state government employees who've been identified by President Trump's team as being likely under the control of the deep state. 50,000. President Trump could purge the U.S. government of these 50,000 who operate under what's called Schedule F, a special employment status with the U.S. government. And we know that with the generals meeting, we understand from one source that we're going to have 850, I believe it's 2-star up, generals, admirals, and commanders of regional U.S. military operations. And we are recalling that President Trump, one of his goals that has been communicated by Pete Hegseth is to purge the U.S. military commanders by 20%. So during this meeting of the generals on Tuesday, we could see a purge of 20% of the generals. We could see President Trump shutting down, allowing the U.S. government budget to shut down, whereby President Trump could also purge at least 50,000 deep state government employees and also purge the government of wasteful spending. And we have this from InfoWars, Alex Jones. So over the weekend, we're seeing warlike operations going on in the U.S. in several locations. We know we had in Portland, Oregon, also in Chicago, major deep state operations against the federal government. So we had a shooting in Chicago at the ICE location on Broadview over the weekend, and the feds arrested 11, and we had Homeland Security on location, and the feds also found that these 11 they arrested had guns and some type of incendiary bomb-like device. So that's going on. And we had President Trump sending the National Guard to Portland, Oregon, where there was Friday hundreds of the deep state, George Soros paid Antifa protesters. We know President Trump has labeled Antifa a terrorist organization. And there were many arrests there also. But President Trump had on site the National Guard. So we see warlike situations going on inside the U.S. And we have this. We also can speculate that the U.S. is prepping for some type of warlike activity with regard to Ukraine. So we have Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. We have Romania. We also have an election going on in Moldova. And we see the European Union deep state communist movement again with the Moldova election, as we saw the communist takeover in Romania, backed by the EU and NATO, where a government controls elections. People can try to vote in someone they want who doesn't want war, and the communists inside the government take over and nullify the election. We saw that happen in Romania recently, and we see it currently taking place in Moldova. So that's going on. Now, over the weekend, we have 7 refuelers leaving the U.S., according to Hal Turner's intel, to go to Estonia. And we see Estonia building up, we believe, for some type of NATO situation. Now, Hal Turner notes there's no NATO exercise going on. So why would 7 refuelers be needed in Estonia? Refuelers are used to refuel U.S. jets, fighter jets. And we had 3 out of 7 come out of McConnell Air Force Base in Wichita, Kansas. And also this included a special type of refueler called SOAR, which could stay in the air longer and operate with less communications. So you only would use the SOAR refuelers in a warlike setting. We have this from Military Tactical Update that paratroopers, and we know we have Venezuela about to go hot, and we have U.S. paratroopers going to Venezuela, the Venezuela area, about midnight last night. And we know we currently have 10 warships in the Caribbean, along with other military equipment. From BORZIKKMAN. Now, BORZIKKMAN is bringing up this exercise that happened some time ago. NATO had an exercise named Neptune. BORZIKKMAN, that's really a site that puts forth Russian information, is putting this forth that during this NATO exercise Neptune in the Gulf of Finland, that two Russian bombers, Su-24s, buzzed a German frigate, the Hamburg, and the Hamburg was practicing putting missiles into St. Petersburg in Russia. So St. Petersburg, that's what NATO was doing during this Neptune exercise, was a direct NATO hit on Russia. And the Russian bombers buzzed the German ship and used electronic warfare to place the ship in virtual standstill while the planes were overhead. So yeah, that's going on. For some reason, BORZIKKMAN is bringing this out again. And we have this from George Galloway. He's a UK journalist. He and his wife recently made a trip to Russia. When they returned, the UK government kept him and his wife in interrogation for 4 hours, even though they had broken no law. But George made interesting comments that the UK MI6, their intel organization comparable to the CIA, asked him no sensible questions like, where did you go in Russia? Who did you talk to? Instead, he believed it was just an example of the government putting forth that they can keep their citizens locked up or confined as long as they want to without a reason. So this is going on. Also, he interviewed Jackson HINKLE on a recent George Galloway show on YouTube, talking about Netanyahu at the UN, and that currently there is a flotilla, group of small boats bringing aid to Gaza, and that they are being protected by warships from Italy, Spain, and Greece. So it will be interesting to see if Israel fires upon these warships. Now, a long-time military individuals will recall that Israel in 1967 tried to sink a U.S. ship, the USS Liberty, and did in fact kill 34 U.S. military and injure many more. So Israel is quite capable of attacking warships from another nation. We have this from ANIA K. She's a Polish journalist talking about Charlie Kirk. And as I've put out on previous shows, I believe Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I believe, by the deep state embedded in the FBI, because prompted by the Zionists, the Israel supporters, because Charlie Kirk was moving away from a Zionist position and saying that, yes, the deep state wants to control and does control all mainstream media in the U.S., ABC, NBC, CBS. And now we have TikTok, that had been a Chinese platform, being purchased, or the purchase okayed by President Trump by loyal Zionist, Oracle, Silver Lake, and MGX. And Larry Ellison is the CEO of Oracle, and a strong Zionist. So we see the Zionist organization taking control not only of the mainstream media, but of independent platforms like TikTok. So that's going on. And we have this from Alex KRAINER. He's a European journalist talking about Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle, now buying TikTok, and a very strong Zionist, and implicated, Alex KRAINER is putting forth as being implicated in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle, is now buying TikTok and CBS. So that's going on. And they are taking over, it appears, also the Charlie Kirk Turning Point USA platform. And we have this from CAPITALCOSM that it's being put forth that the U.S. is making this warlike activity against Venezuela to grab Venezuela oil. I submit it's to take down the cartels located in Venezuela, but also to combat the military assets of Russia, China, and Iran that are now located in Venezuela within easy striking distance of the U.S. And we have this. Yes, there was a strong attack on Ukraine last night by Russia using hundreds of drones. It's also being put forth that the Ukraine military is collapsing, and that the U.S. military generals meeting may be about a purge. And we have this from Colonel Davis Deep Dive. Zelensky's personal worth now, after receiving who knows how much money from the U.S., Zelensky's personal worth is now $1.2 billion. All of it coming from the U.S. And we have Hal Turner talking about Russia made a hit on Ukraine last night, so 9/28, and they took down Ukraine 5 F-16s, and they also took down many NATO advisors. So this happens on a regular basis, that Russia makes hits on Ukraine and kills NATO advisors from Europe and sometimes from the U.S., or that's happened in the past. I'm not sure if the U.S. advisors have been on the ground in Ukraine since President Trump came in. But during JB's time, yes, they were. And we have this, that also trains we're seeing flowing in Estonia toward the Russian border, carrying U.S. Abram tanks. So we see warlike situations with military assets being assembled. We see in the U.S. doing it in the Caribbean. And we see military assets being put on the border of Russia by NATO. And we have this from Military Insider. 850 two-star generals and up will be assembled in the President Trump's military meeting at the Pentagon on Tuesday. And it's being put forth that Pete Hegseth could cut 20% of them. So we don't know what the generals' meeting is about. I have put forth in a previous video that I had confirmed that the reason all these generals and admirals and commanders were being called to the Pentagon for a face-to-face meeting was because the U.S. military communication system has been compromised. So that's going on too. We have this from Hot Zone with Chuck Holten for the generals meeting. So to bring all these generals over the Atlantic, there were many U.S. refuelers in the air. And this morning, Netanyahu gave a UN speech in which he said Israel will retaliate against the European nations who stood up in the UN to recognize Palestine. So that's going on. So I believe it's good to be in prayer for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, and world peace. I love you, and I'll see you soon.